employed?
Yes, I am currently a professor.
And why are you here today?
I was asked to be here on behalf of the parks to give my professional opinion on whether or not Jesse Duran suffered from any mental disorder that would make Jesse act in the way he did on August 18, 2010.
What makes you qualified to give these opinions?
I got my bachelor's from Macalester College in psychology. I got my master's and PhD in psychology from University of Illinois. I completed a one-year internship at the Children's Hospital National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. I've published 25 articles that were all peer-reviewed, 3 books, all on the diagnosis of juvenile psychopathy.
Did you complete a report for today's case?
I did.
And are you peer-reviewed?
I am.
Are your studies accurate and reliable?
Yeah.
And what did you review to complete today's report?
I reviewed the affidavits of Terry Chapman, Sandy Brooks, Hayden Duran, Angie Park, and I read the deposition of Jesse Duran. I looked at exhibits 1, 8, 9, and 10. I interviewed 3 former babysitters, 6 former teachers, and 11 former classmates.
And what were your conclusions?
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yes, Your Honor. We've heard about the kind of data that the expert relied upon. We haven't heard any procedure as to how she came to a conclusion so far.
Response?
If you give me a moment, and in the next few questions, she will let you know how she came upon that.
I do want to hear a little bit more about how the expert came to her conclusions. If Dr. Couples goes into that before she gets to her conclusion, I think this will all clear up.
Okay.
So just please lay a little more foundation before we actually get to her ultimate conclusion. All right, so sustain.
Yes, Your Honor.
What exactly did you review for today's case?
I reviewed all those affidavits and the depositions and the exhibits.
And what exhibits did you review?
I reviewed the disciplinary note from Jesse's school. I reviewed a drawing that Jesse made. I reviewed an email from Hayden to her friend, and I reviewed one more. I don't remember which.
And what were your conclusions?
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
The same grounds as before?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, I would like to hear, you told us about the documents she relied upon. I'd like to hear how she used them and whether that's reasonable and reliable in her field, specifically how she applied those documents. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that before we get to her conclusion. So sustain once again.
Now, how did you use these affidavits and these exhibits in your report?
Well, after I read them, I applied them to what is called the PAIJ, the Psychopathy Assessment Instrument Juvenile. It is a way of assessing, it is the standard way of assessing whether or not a juvenile suffers from psychopathy.
And did you use all the exhibits and the affidavits to make a conclusion to the PAIJ assessment?
Yes.
And what was Jesse's score in this PAIJ assessment?
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation again. May I elaborate?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we have heard that the witness actually applied the PAIJ test. We haven't heard the exact procedure as to how she applied the PAIJ test into coming to her conclusions about Jesse's score.
I think they've laid enough foundation at this point, since we've been over this before. That being said, if you want to cross on the application of that test, you're more than free to do so if it's on your cross-examination, but for now, I think they've laid enough foundation.
Yes, Your Honor.
So overruled.
After using the PAIJ assessment, what were your conclusions?
Well, the PAIJ goes on a scale from 0 to 20. You need a score of at least 12 to be considered psychopathic. The way the scoring goes is you're given for each of 10 traits between 0 and 2, 2 being exhibiting this trait all the time, 0 being never. Jesse did get a score of 12, which is the minimum.
And what exactly is psychopathy? Can you explain that to us?
Psychopathy is a mental condition in which someone exhibits amoral or manifests amoral and antisocial behaviors.
And what does this mean exactly?
Well, in the instance of Jesse, this antisocial behavior is, well, Jesse didn't have many friends and didn't, because of the disciplinary note, didn't get along with peers very well. And amoral, amoral being that Jesse would do things that other people wouldn't even think of doing.
Under the PAIJ assessment, are there any indicators for psychopathy?
There are 10 major ones, or 10 in all, but 4 major ones that Jesse exhibited, which Jesse scored a 2 on. There's persistent aggression, there's gratuitous and guiltless lying, defiance of authority figures, and disregard for punishment.
Objection, Your Honor, improper character evidence.
You may be heard on that note.
Your Honor, I'm objecting to improper character evidence to the traits that the witness just described, showing action in conformity therewith.
So you're saying because Jesse scored a 2 on persistent aggression, you're saying it would be more likely for her to act aggressively in the future?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you have a response to that, Counsel?
This is an expert witness, and this is going to the medical diagnosis of Jesse, so she would know and she'd be able to diagnose through the affidavits and through the exhibits of how Jesse scored and what the indicators were.
Well, counsel seems to be saying, on the other hand, that despite the fact she's an expert, and this is a medical diagnosis, that diagnosis, or at least its traits, constitute improper character evidence. Can you elaborate a little more on
Can I
that?
have a moment, please?
Yes, please.
Under a state of Hamilton v. Walton.
Case law, counsel? One moment, please. Okay, got that. Here we go. To which case are you referring?
Estate of Hamilton v. Walton.
All right, very well.
So the fact that a person suffers from medically recognized psychological disorder is not character evidence any more than the fact that a person has a physical condition that would make it easier or harder for him or her to perform an act given.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I believe that what the case law talks about is a medical condition itself being not character evidence. I'm objecting specifically to the character traits that the witness was talking about. They don't fall under the same exception.
Would you like to elaborate a little further?
She's using these indicators to make a medical diagnosis. She has used some form of indicators to make a medical diagnosis. There's no other way around it.
I do think that this goes enough to her diagnosis that she has to go into this testimony, and I do think it falls enough under Hamilton v. Walton that this does not constitute proper character evidence. So I do think they are allowed to say what Jesse scored on these specific factors. That being said, I don't think this is unlimited. I don't think counsel can go into specific instances of Jesse Duran's conduct, but simply for Jesse Duran's scores on this evaluation, I do think that's admissible. So on this note, you're overruled.
Your Honor, may we get a limiting instruction as to the witness not talking about the specific instances of conduct of Jesse Duran?
Yes, counsel, please do not go into the specific instances of conduct of Jesse Duran, just Jesse Duran's scores you were doing. Additionally, I'll also instruct the jury that they're not to take this as action in conformity with any particular character trait for Jesse Duran.
Yes, Your Honor.
So overruled to an extent.
Now you're saying Jesse indicated it had 4 different indicators. Can you repeat what they were again?
There were gratuitous and guiltless lying, persistent aggression, there was defiance of authority figures, and disregard for punishment.
And based on those 4 indicators, do you believe that Jesse suffered from psychopathy?
With all the indicators adding up to a score of 12, which is the minimum, I did come to the conclusion that Jesse Duran suffered from psychopathy on August 16, 2010, and the time leading up to it.
Why do you believe this?
Well, because of all the things that I reviewed, they did point me in the right direction of making that diagnosis.
And do you believe that a person suffering from psychopathy can form intent?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of the witness's testimony.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Your Honor, opposing counsel asked a question that goes specifically to intent. That's outside the scope of the witness's expertise at this point.
What exactly was your question, counsel?
If a person suffering from psychopathy can form intent, if they have the ability to. Mary Smith?
Yes, you may.
Because she is an expert witness, like she is able to know under the PAIJ assessment, and the indicators, what he suffered from, and she'd be able to come to a conclusion of, as she stated, that she believes that he did, and why.
we've established she's an expert in psychology and specifically psychopathy. That being said, to go and say whether or not an individual suffering from psychopathy can have the requisite mental state to form intent, how do you lay foundation for that?
I can rephrase the question.
Yes, please.
Yes, Your Honor, motion to strike the question?
For now, unless they rephrase, then it's possible for them to get this testimony in the record. So for now, stricken.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you believe it's possible that someone suffering from psychopathy can form intent? Is it possible?
In my expert opinion, yes, anyone has the ability to form intent, but what sets people
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope, and at this point, I would also object to testifying to a legal conclusion.
I think you can rephrase this testimony, Counselor. That being said, I do think that this is a little too close to a legal conclusion. I think there's a danger that the jury might misconstrue this as legal testimony when it's testimony about a psychological condition. But if you could just rephrase this. So, sustained, and this testimony is stricken for now.
Yes, Your Honor.
Under the 4 indicators that you gave about Jesse, do you believe that's possible that Jesse could have intended to shoot or shot Sydney Park?
anyone has the ability to intentionally do something. What sets people with psychopathy apart from others is a complete disregard for the repercussions of their actions.
No further question.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Dr. Couples. I have a few questions for you. Now, you mentioned that you were looking into Jesse's psychological condition, correct?
Yes.
Not his intent?
Well, not exactly.
Not exactly. What you were looking into was actually the PAIJ score of Jesse Durant.
Yes.
That would go towards psychopathy.
Yes, and how it affected his mental state and whether or not it affected his actions on that day.
Well, I'd like to talk about the PAIJ test that you used a little bit more. This test is actually for people just slightly over Jesse Durant's age, correct?
Only 1 year, but I've done extensive research on its application to younger juveniles.
But it was developed for people over Jesse Durant's age.
Originally only a year.
But it's still over Jesse Durant's age, correct?
Yes.
And whenever you were using this instrument, you never got your conclusions reviewed, did you?
I don't know.
You never got your conclusions reviewed for a test that you used for a child that was under the age of the actual testing?
My conclusions for this particular case?
Yes.
No.
You never accounted for a margin of error either?
No.
You never got a second opinion on your conclusions, did you?
I have many years of knowledge on this subject. I don't need to.
Yes or no? Did you get a second opinion on your conclusions?
No.
I'd like to move forward then and talk about application of the PAIJ a little bit more. When it comes to psychopathy, there's some disagreement about the causes of psychopathy.
Right.
And there's some disagreement as to even if you can diagnose a person without talking to them.
I wouldn't say that there's disagreement. We just don't know. No one's arguing about whether, or the causes or anything like that, but we just collectively don't know.
So people in your field don't know how psychopathy is caused?
Specifically. We don't know what the specific causes are. We know what can cause it.
Alright, and it's hard to diagnose a person without talking to their parent either.
It could cause problems, but it's not impossible.
And you never talked to Jesse Durant, did you?
No,
Never talked to Hayden Durant either.
I was not allowed to.
I'd like to shift gears here and talk about Jesse Durant's PAIJ score in particular now. You gave him a score of 12, right?
I did.
And you mentioned on direct exam that you were medically diagnosing Jesse Durant with psychopathy.
Right.
But you never actually submitted a medical report, did you?
No.
I'd like to talk about the cause of psychopathy that you mentioned Jesse Durant might have had. You mentioned 4 factors, right?
Yeah.
And of those 4 factors, no one was there when Jesse Durant was guiltlessly lying.
His teachers were.
But Hayden Durant wasn't there, was he?
I didn't come across any instances, but I'm not saying that there weren't any.
But you never came across any instances where Hayden Durant was there when this happened.
No.
Andy Park wasn't there when this happened.
No.
Let's move on and talk about another cause that you mentioned. You also said that Jesse had persistent aggression, right? Now, Hayden Durant wasn't there when you were looking into these causes of Jesse showing psychopathy, was he?
No, Hayden Durant doesn't follow Jesse to school.
Andy Park wasn't there either.
No.
You weren't there either.
No.
So you weren't there to physically examine any of these instances of Jesse's behavior.
I didn't need to.
Yes or no? Were you there or not?
No, I didn't need to be.
And you never actually even saw any videos of Jesse behaving aggressively.
I didn't, but I didn't need to.
I'd like to move forward and talk about some of these other causes. You also mentioned that Jesse had issues with listening to authoritative figures like parents, correct?
I guess parents could be one example.
Let's talk about that example in particular. When Jesse was defying authority, Hayden Durant wasn't there, was he?
Could you repeat that?
When Jesse was defying authoritative figures, Hayden Durant was not there.
Again, Hayden doesn't follow Jesse to school all the time. Most of these examples happened at school, and I don't think teachers will lie about these things.
You mentioned teachers earlier too. I want to talk about that. Whenever you interviewed teachers, they were verbal interviews, right?
Yes.
There's no evidence of how those interviews came across?
No, but I don't think I'd make anything up.
There's no sworn-in statements of those interviews either?
No, but that's what I use to make my diagnosis, so I can use those as I wish.
But there's no evidence as to how true they are, correct?
No, but I don't think teachers would lie to someone like me.
And babysitters wouldn't lie either?
No, I'm a doctor. People don't usually lie to doctors.
No. Okay, Dr. Couples. You weren't there when actually any of this happened to Jesse Durant, were you?
I'm not usually anywhere my patients are when things like this happen, but no, I wasn't.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Redirect? You may proceed.
Can you please tell me the 4 indicators again?
There's persistent aggression, gratuitous and guiltless lying, defiance of authority figures, and disregard for punishment.
Now, the first indicator, why is that important?
And that was persistent aggression.
Yes.
That is important because not all people are persistently
Objection,
aggressive.
Your Honor. Outside the scope of my cross-examination. May I elaborate?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, I specifically asked questions as to whether or not she was there when Jesse Durant exhibited these behaviors. I never asked as to how she came to those conclusions.
That being said, Counselor, you did impute her diagnosis and go into some of the specific factors, how the page mechanism works. I do think they have some latitude to talk to the jury again about her diagnosis. That being said, it is slightly outside the scope of what she talked about, and while I do think you can redress this briefly, just be careful not to go into it too much further. So,
Yes, Your
overruled.
And what was the second indicator of Jesse again?
Gratuitous and guiltless lying.
Can you give me a little bit of information about that, just a little bit?
Psychopaths tend to lie all the time, frequently, and that makes what they say not believable. You should take everything they say at face value.
And how did that go to Jesse Durant?
That made me believe that Jesse's written statement was
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope.
At this point, for this witness to go into new facts and data that weren't really touched on cross and say that Jesse Durant's written statement should be viewed with distrust, I do think that's a little outside what she talked.
I'll move on to the next.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
Yes, please. Or, yes.
What was the third indicator again?
defiance of authority figures.
And can you just give me a little bit of explanation of that, what that is?
Psychopaths make an example of themselves by persistently defying authority figures, and you can take them out of the crowd pretty easily.
And what was the fourth indicator?
It was disregard for punishment.
And can you give me a brief explanation of that?
That's like if the kid was asked to pick up their toys, they overtly don't do it, and also, like in a classroom setting, you can take them out.
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope again.
I'm gonna give him a little latitude to keep talking about these. That being said, let's wrap it up.
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you believe Jesse suffered from these four indicators?
In my expert opinion, yes.
And how did you come to that conclusion?
Using the PAIJ.
No further questions.
Recross.
No recross, Your Honor.
Dr. Couples, you may take your seat. Your next witness?
Yes, the plaintiff calls Danny Brooks to the stand.
You may proceed.
Would you please state your name, spelling the last for the court record?
Danny Brooks, B-R-O-O-K-S.
And what is your occupation, Ms. Brooks?
I'm a babysitter.
And who do you babysit?
Well, I babysit a lot of kids. I love kids. They're my favorite thing, what I like to do. But Sydney was my favorite.
And who is Sydney?
Sydney is Andy and Lee's daughter. She died on August 18th.
Do you know Sydney's mother?
I do.
Can you identify Andy Park in court today?
Yeah, she's right there.
Now, how long have you babysat Sydney?
For a long time. I was a baby, pretty much.
Would you say you got to know her fairly well?
Yeah, Sydney, she was just like one of my own kids.
And how would you describe Sydney?
Well, she was really smart, but she was kind of shy, and she really only had a couple friends, but she was just the sweetest little thing. She always would help me, and we'd have such a good time together.
Have you ever had the chance to meet any of her friends?
Really only one in particular, just because he was over at the park house when I babysat a lot.
And who would this person be?
Jesse Duran.
And how often was Jesse Duran at Sydney Park?
Jesse was there quite often, probably about 2 to 3 times a week. I would be watching both of them.
Would you say you got to know Jesse fairly well?
Yeah.
Can you describe the relationship between Jesse and Sydney?
Well, things would start off good, and then in the midst of playing.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is speculating into the relationship of Jesse and Sydney Duran. If opposing counsel could rephrase the question to only limit it to this witness's impression of the relationship, that would be acceptable.
What exactly was the portion of the witness statement that you thought was speculation?
She was speculating into a relationship with 2 different people that she was not one of, and therefore cannot tell their relationship.
Well, what exactly did the witness do? What was the witness statement that you thought was speculative?
She was beginning to state their relationship was, and then I object.
Response.
Your Honor, I have laid the proper foundation as to how this witness knows both of these, both Jesse Duran and Sydney Park. I am not asking the witness to go into the mindset of Jesse Duran or Sydney Park. I'm just asking her about her impression of the relationship between these 2 children.
Counselor, they clarified and said that the relationship appeared. Would this be correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you just go ahead and we can proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, please do so.
Ms. Brooks, how did the relationship between Sydney and Jesse appear to you?
Well, I mean, it would start off really good. They would be having fun, and then Jesse would become a bully and just.
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper character evidence.
You go a little further.
This witness is using the phrase Jesse's being a bully to show propensity and conformity therewith, and saying that if he was a bully on this instance, that he would be a bully on August 18th.
Response.
Your Honor, I am asking the witness her present sense impression as to what occurred in the relationship between Sydney and Jesse, and also if you would allow for further line of testimony that this will show that Jesse had the intent, was forming the intent for the acts of August 18, 2010, as well as the preparation and the motive.
If you go specifically into motive or intent, I think that is admissible. That being said, to say Jesse was a bully, I think counselor is right. That is improper character evidence. You're trying to suggest that it's more likely he was a bully on August 18th because of this. So that's stricken. That being said, you're welcome to go into motive and intent specific. So sustained, counselor, and I'll strike that from the record.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Brooks, were there any instances where you were concerned with Jesse Duran's behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Hayden numerous times, and I told him that I was worried about what,
Objection, Your Honor. Witness is entering into a statement of hearsay.
Specifically the statements of Hayden Duran?
No, Your Honor. Her own statements are still out-of-court statements that she is offering for the truth of the matter asserted, and therefore are still hearsay.
Response.
Your Honor, I will be citing the exception to hearsay under present sense impression. This witness knows what she said and was in the moment of what she said, so she is well able to testify as to her own statements.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
A present sense impression, by definition, is not what opposing counsel just stated, and this witness was not talking about a specific instance. She said, "I've told him many times," which is still hearsay, and not a present sense impression, as we do not know what event caused that impression.
Response.
Your Honor, this witness has not had the chance to say anything. She merely said that I've told him many times, but she did not finish her statements. There is nothing to object to. May I have a moment of counsel as well?
Absolutely. You may.
Your Honor, I move that this is a first-hand knowledge of the witness, not a present sense impression, and is still an exception to hearsay.
Which exception does it fall under?
If I may explain this a little further, this refers to Rule 803, so number one, present sense impression. I will explain that the statement describing or explaining an event or condition, this event or condition would be the instance where Jesse Duran interacted with Sydney Park. This witness was there at the time. This statement that she made was immediately after this incident occurred, and therefore still is present sense impression.
Defense counsel was arguing not that the statement specifically as it was related to Hayden Duran, when this witness told Hayden Duran that statement was hearsay, and that constituted, or rather did not constitute a present sense impression. Was Hayden Duran there when this event occurred?
Hayden Duran was not there. Present sense impression would be applying to this witness by herself, because she made these statements immediately after she perceived the incident between Jesse and Sydney.
Originally, this witness was making these statements to Hayden Duran. Who is this witness making these statements to?
It's Hayden Duran.
Can you respond to that, counselor?
Again, it is not a present sense impression. We haven't heard anything about this instance, and if the offer of proof that opposing counsel brought up is the route they're trying to go with this testimony, it would be improper character evidence if she furthers that point.
I think counsel's right. We haven't heard enough foundation to say that this is a present sense impression. And if this witness is going to make statements to Hayden Duran under this hearsay exception, preferably Hayden Duran would be there during the event or immediately afterwards, and I don't think we've heard that. So I'm going to sustain counsel's objection on hearsay grounds.
Motion to strike.
Great.
Ms. Brooks, was there any event that you felt concerned with between Jesse and Sydney?
Yes. There was one day we were all in the kitchen like making cookies and stuff, and so I told him to go ahead and go play for a few minutes while the cookies were baking, and I would keep an eye on them. And then all of a sudden I hear Jesse like yelling, "Bang! I want you to die!"
Objection, Your Honor. This is more prejudicial than probative, and it is improper character evidence. It's more prejudicial than probative because it's going to confuse the jury as to the language that is being offered.
What exactly is the full statement, counselor?
For what the witness was saying?
Yes.
I do not believe the witness finished making her statement.
Do you know what the witness is gonna say?
I believe she was going to say that she heard Jesse Duran yell loudly enough, clearly enough that she could hear, I want you to die, and then she was going to, I believe she was going to explain what were the circumstances around that. Also, this would be showing the motive and the preparation of Jesse Duran prior to August 18th, 2010 for intentional shooting.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the improper character evidence objection you just outlined?
Yes, Your Honor. By offering these statements, this witness is trying to show that this single instance of Jesse Duran's conduct shows propensity and conformity therewith, that while playing a game, as the witness stated, he made this statement, and therefore on August 18th would be more likely to commit the act in question.
Feel free to cross on that, especially if this did occur during a game. That being said, I think we have outlined that this is a statement of motive, intent, or preparation. So I don't think that constitutes improper character evidence. So I'm going to overrule your objection.
Yes, sir.
You may proceed.
Ms. Brooks, could you repeat what you said?
Well, like I said, I was watching the cookies, and all of a sudden I hear really loud and clear Jesse say, "Bang! I want you to die." And so I immediately went into the room, and I was shocked, first of all, because I don't like that sort of words used around me. I mean, and so when I went in there, I found them playing a video game, or they were playing some sort of a game.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is now launched into a narrative.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
They were playing a game, and I told Jesse immediately, I was like, don't say those things, and I made them stop playing the game just because it was bad. Like, I didn't want to hear that. So I told Hayden as soon as he came to pick up Jesse, I said, this is not good.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. Same objection I made prior with the same argument.
What's your response to that?
Your Honor, my previous response as to that this would be a presence of suppression, as to the fact that Hayden Duran was not there at the time of the event, but Danny Brooks did tell Hayden Duran, immediately after this event occurred, what her thoughts and impressions were.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
Present sense impression needs to be immediately after that event. Had Ms. Brooks said something directly after hearing Jesse Duran's statement, then yes, it would be a present sense impression. However, we don't know how much time passed between the event occurring and this witness speaking to Mr. Duran.
I'm inclined to agree with counsel that all we know right now is that Jesse made some statements, and later in the day, this witness relayed those statements to Hayden Duran. If we're going to qualify this as an 80301, then I really want to hear that these statements were relayed to Hayden Duran at the time that Jesse made these statements, or immediately thereafter. And until we lay that foundation, I don't think we can use either one. So sustained for now and struck from the record.
Ms. Brooks, have you notified anybody about this incident?
Yes, I mean, before then, I notified both parents. I told Andy what had happened, and I also informed Hayden about it too.
And what was your impression of Hayden's response?
Well, Hayden just sort of shrugged it off, like nothing had happened, like he didn't care. That's what kids do. That's the impression I got, and I didn't appreciate it.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay as to Mr. Duran's statements that this witness is relaying that it's hearsay, Your Honor.
So you're objecting not to this witness's statement to Hayden Duran, but Hayden Duran's response as hearsay?
Both, Your Honor. I'm objecting to the hearsay, and then not the hearsay within hearsay of Hayden Duran's statements, but the hearsay of this witness's statements towards Hayden Duran.
So this witness's statements to Hayden Duran?
Yes, Your Honor.
Response, counsel?
Your Honor, I have not asked this witness what she said to Hayden Duran, and she has not told in court what Hayden Duran was. I have merely asked her to relate her present first-hand knowledge of what Hayden Duran's response was. This is not hearsay. She was merely relating her observations of what happened at that time.
So this witness related her observations of what she saw on August 17th to Hayden Duran?
What her observations of Hayden Duran were in this particular instance.
So you're not actually going into any hearsay statements, it's just Hayden Duran's response to what this witness said?
Yes, I'm not going to any hearsay statements, I'm only asking this witness to tell her observations of what Hayden Duran appeared to be like.
What's your response to that?
Your Honor, that's not what the witness was answering then. If opposing counsel could rephrase the question to focus the witness in on that specific response, then I would redact my objection. But at this time, the witness did launch into assertions made outside of court, offered for the truth of the matter asserted, which is the definition of hearsay.
I do think, or at least it seemed to me, that the witness was going into certain specific statements. If you can just rephrase this to Hayden Duran's reaction, then would that be amenable to counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's just do that. Please do so.
Could I get a ruling for the record?
Overruled for the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Brooks, what was your observation of Hayden Duran's response?
Well, Mr. Duran's reaction was just to shrug it off, essentially, and I got the impression that he just didn't care what I told him. He just didn't care.
Objection, Your Honor. That was an improper opinion. If she had prefaced it again with the impression as she did in the middle statement, her first and last statements are still improper opinion, as she does not know the mental state of Hayden Duran at all.
If the witness can just say senior appeared, then I think this will clear up. So, sustain her.
How did Mr. Duran appear to be when you approached him?
Mr. Duran appeared not to care.
Ms. Brooks, I would like to, did Jesse Duran's behavior change after this?
No, we had instance after instance of just the disrespect, not only to me when I broke up instances.
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper character evidence. The witness is offering these instances to show propensity and conformity therewith of now Hayden Duran's actions.
Your Honor, if I may be allowed to have leeway with this line of testimony, this will go towards the motive of Jesse Duran on August 18, 2010, as well as his preparation towards his actions.
With the specific statement, I want to shoot you, Sydney, bang, bang. I can understand that there was some intent there that you were trying to establish, but this testimony really does seem to go for the propensity evidence on Hayden and Jesse Duran. If you want to proffer something else specific from 404B, feel free to do so, but this testimony, I feel, is improper evidence. Sustained, counsel.
Motion to strike?
Granted.
Ms. Brooks, has there been any, Ms. Brooks, has Jesse ever defied you in specific, has Jesse ever defied you?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, leading question.
Please rephrase, counselor.
Ms. Brooks, did you have, Ms. Brooks, is there anything that that surfaces to your mind about Jesse Duran?
Objection, Your Honor, vague question.
I'll let the witness figure that out.
Yes, Your Honor.
If the witness wants to re-clarify, the witness is free to do so.
Can you re-ask it, please?
Is there any specific instance of Jesse Duran that approaches your mind?
Well, I mean, Jesse didn't really care to listen to anything that I told him, and I wasn't being paid to watch Jesse.
Objection, Your Honor, improper character evidence.
So Jesse didn't care?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Ms. Brooks, how long have you, Ms. Brooks, what happened on August 18, 2010? Do you know?
Well, I wasn't there. I unfortunately the night before I had a family emergency, so I had to leave right away, and I couldn't come in the following day. But to my knowledge, well, that's the day that Sydney died.
And do you have any idea of how Sydney died?
Well, I mean, I knew sooner or later Jesse would snap, and finally he did.
Objection, Your Honor, improper character evidence. And improper opinion, for that matter.
Counsel, what's your response to both of those?
Your Honor, as to improper character evidence, I am trying to show that Jesse had a motive and a preparation towards the actions on August 18, 2010. And as to the second objection, what was it again?
Improper opinion?
Improper opinion, this witness has been laid the foundation that she knew Jesse Duran, that she knew him for a long time, and that she could see and testify as to the relationship between Jesse Duran and Sydney Parks.
I'm inclined to agree with defense counsel in the statement. I knew Jesse would snap sooner or later. Considering this is a lay witness, doesn't seem proper. Additionally, if this witness had any sort of background information or foundation for this conclusion, it seems like it would have to be improper character evidence. So I'm going to strike that portion. Sustain.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Brooks, do you have any idea of what happened on August 18, 2010?
Well, I mean, I just know what people have told me. I know Sydney died and
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. If this witness is testifying to solely what people told her, that would be hearsay and not her own observations.
Counsel, are you contesting that Sydney died?
I am not, Your Honor. However, I am contesting that this witness would have no knowledge of what happened that day in that home except for what people told her, which is not a proper opinion for her to state.
I'll let this witness state that Sydney died, as you're not contesting that. That being said, if this witness wasn't there and is just relaying information that other people told her, in the future I'll be inclined to agree with counsel. So overruled for now.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Brooks, do you know what happened on August 18, 2010?
Sydney died.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Hi, Ms. Brooks. I'd like to begin by clearing up something that you said on direct.
Okay.
You mentioned that you've known the Parks for a really long time, correct?
I mean, for a while, I watched Sydney all the time, so I would say I got to know them pretty well.
And you mentioned on direct that you've known Sydney since she was a baby, right?
I mean, I babysat her for a long time. I don't remember exactly when I started, but for a while.
But you did say that you've known her since she's a baby, correct?
I mean, I said since she was little.
And so little, so this is more than a couple of years, right? That you've known her?
I can't really say. I mean, I don't keep direct tabs on when I start watching children. All I know is how well I've gotten to know her. It feels like I've known her all her life.
So to clarify, your testimony today is that to you it feels as if you have known Sydney Park your whole life.
Not my whole life.
Her whole life.
That's what it feels like, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach opposing counsel with it has previously been marked as this witness's affidavit?
You may.
And the second copy is just the same. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I've just handed you your affidavit, correct?
Yes.
And it's a clear and accurate copy, correct?
Yeah, it looks to be.
And that's your signature on the last page, right?
Yes.
I'd like to direct your attention to line 12. I first met Andy Park, and then moving on to line 13, in February of 2010.
Okay.
Okay. May I approach and retrieve, Your Honor?
You may.
Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And so you really had only known the Parks for about 4 months.
Yes, but I watched Sydney all the time, so it felt like I've known her longer.
Directing you back to my question, you'd only known the Parks for 4 months, correct?
Yes, but it felt like longer to me.
Right. And on August 17th, you found out that Sydney knew how to get into the safe, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
What's the relevance, counsel?
Well, Your Honor, as the defense, we are trying to show that Jesse Duran should not be held liable for the intentional shooting of Sydney Park. And as my co-counsel said in the beginning, we would be looking into an affirmative defense to show that if we were at fault, so were the Parks.
You respond to that?
Your Honor, I believe counsel is confusing the issues between negligent parental supervision and intentional shooting. Also, counsel has not stated as to what kind of an affirmative defense they are pursuing.
Is counsel pursuing an affirmative defense?
No, Your Honor. I apologize for that.
Then why is this testimony relevant?
This testimony is relevant because it goes to show that Jesse Duran did not have full knowledge to be able to enact this plan that opposing counsel is alleging that he concocted and carried out himself.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, this statement has in no way is relevant because it does not show intent on Jesse Duran's behalf, but rather is concerning itself with something outside of that intent. It is not being offered to show intent on whether or not Jesse actually had intent on August 18, 2010.
Wasn't the point they're trying to rebut your accusation of intent? Isn't that the relevance asserted?
No, Your Honor, they are confusing the issues between negligent parental supervision, in which case they are trying to show that the parks had some sort of a duty before August 18, 2010, and that is not the way that they're pursuing. They are supposed to talk about intentional shooting and not negligent parental supervision.
Did the parks have any sort of duty outline or any sort of responsibility?
Your Honor, I was not confusing the issues. I know full well that negligent parental supervision is not what we're pursuing, or they are pursuing today. However, I did not speak about Andy Park. I'm trying to get this witness to give a little more insight as to the day directly before Sydney Park's death and Sydney Park's actions in conjunction with Jesse Duran's.
I'm going to issue a limiting instruction to the jury that they're not going to take this as responsible for the negligence of the parks. That being said, I do think counsel can go into this somewhat as foundational. We haven't heard how these two children got this gun, where this gun is located. So to that extent, I think this is foundational. So I'll overrule your objection, but issue a limiting instruction.
Let me repeat the question for you, Ms. Brooks.
Please.
On August 17th, you found out that Sydney Park knew where the gun was in the Park's home, correct?
That, like, she knew it was in the safe?
Yes.
Yes.
And you also found out that she had a pretty good idea of where that combination was kept.
It depends on what you
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Can you rephrase your question, counselor? So sustained.
On August 17th, Sydney Park expressed knowledge of where the combination was kept, correct?
Well, we had a conversation about it, and she said she just pointed in the general direction of the desk and said it was the bottom right drawer.
And then you went and looked into this desk, correct?
I would never go through their files. I mean, I opened the drawer, but I did not go through their files. I didn't know if it was actually in there or not.
So directing you back to my question, you did open the door and look into the drawer, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance again, renewing my objection.
I still think this is foundational, where this combination was kept. Yeah, I think this still falls within the purview of foundation. However, Watcher counselor, we're setting most of the foundation now, so we shouldn't go into this too much further. So
Yes, Your Honor.
overruled.
Back to my question, you did open the drawer and look in it, correct?
I did open the drawer, yes.
And it was files.
Yes.
Alright, I'd like to move on and talk about when, after you spoke with Sydney, Miss Park came home, correct? On the 17th?
Yes.
And Lee came home, correct?
I was 4 years old. I don't remember if we. I know that Andy did though.
And you did not tell either of them that Sydney had knowledge of the gun, correct?
Well, like I said before, I had a family emergency, so no, I did not tell Andy, but I would have if I had gotten a chance to.
So that was a no, correct?
Yes.
And then you weren't there at all on August 18th, were you?
No, like I said, I was dealing with my family emergency.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect,
Yes, Your Honor.
please proceed.
Ms. Brooks, for how long did you know Sydney Park?
Well, like I said before, I felt like I knew her for a while, but apparently it was over 4 months.
And Ms. Brooks, have you ever had reason to believe that Jesse knew that there was a gun in the Park home?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Have you ever had reason to believe that Jesse knew that there was a gun in the Park's home?
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of my cross-examination. I didn't question Ms. Brooks about anything related to Jesse Duran's knowledge of the gun.
Well, since you did question her about whether the park thing, they kind of know where this gun is kept, and Sydney's knowledge of this gun, I do think they have some latitude to talk about whether Jesse is aware of this gun. So overruled.
Would you like me to restate my question?
Yes, please.
Have you ever had reason to believe that Jesse knew that the Parks owned a gun?
I mean, I think it was like the day before, so that there was stuff mentioned, and I immediately shut it down. But, so yes.
So Sydney wasn't the only one that knew about the gun.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Yeah, sustained.
Motion to strike the question and the answer.
The answer is stricken. Counsel can rephrase the question.
To your knowledge, who knew about the Parks gun?
Well, Angie and me, and I found out earlier when I started babysitting. Sydney had asked me about it before, and then Jesse had mentioned it.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the questions.
Recross.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Brooks, please retake your seat.
Thank you.
Plaintiff and the other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff would like to call the park to the stand.
Very well.
May I proceed?
You may.
Can you say your name and spell your last for the record, please?
Andy Park, P-A-R-K.
Do you have any children in this park?
I have a daughter. Yes, I have.
And who was that?
Sydney. My baby Sydney.
Can you describe your baby Sydney for us, please?
Well, Sydney was awesome. She was beautiful. She was everything that I lived for. She was intelligent. And she's gone now, so.
Why is she gone?
She was killed.
Do you have any knowledge as to why she was killed, or excuse me, how she was killed?
She was shot.
Do you know anything else about, how she was shot or who she was shot by?
Jesse shot her, my baby.
And who was Jesse?
Objection more prejudicial than probative.
How so?
Your Honor, opposing counsel just asked the witness as to how and why Sydney was shot, and by Mrs. Park saying that Jesse shot Sydney, it's going to show prejudice to the jury against Jesse Duran and his intentions to shoot Sydney, which is why we're here today in court.
Response, counsel?
I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Please do so.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Until counsel rephrases his question. So, stricken for now.
When did your daughter die?
August 18, 2010.
Now, you mentioned a person named Jesse. Who is Jesse?
Well, Jesse was Sydney's best friend, or so I thought, was Sydney's best friend. It was Hayden's son, and they were our neighbors, and they were friends for a while.
How long did you know Jesse and Hayden?
I knew Jesse and Hayden, well, Jesse since they were little. He played together. Sydney and Jesse played together for quite a long time, and I had previously known Hayden from work experience.
Now, from your observations, would you be able to describe to us what the relationship between Jesse and Sydney seemed like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time watching Jesse as well as my babysitter, Danny Brooks. At first, Jesse and Sydney played great together because Sydney really needed that friend, but then eventually their friendship started to turn a little aggressive. Jesse had more aggressive tendencies toward Sydney, and I started to become uncomfortable with this. I wanted to help Hayden.
Now, once you started to see these things, how did you feel about Jesse visiting your house?
Well, like I said, I let Jessie come over because that was Sydney's best friend, and I wanted her to be happy. I wanted my baby to have a friend, because she didn't have a lot of friends. And I wanted to help Hayden out because he was a single parent, and he was my friend, so.
And after all this, how did you end up feeling about Jesse?
I started to become uncomfortable with him around Sydney. I didn't like his aggressive tendencies, and I knew that something was going to happen sooner or later.
And why did you feel this way?
Objection, speculation. Mrs. Park does not have knowledge as to what was going to happen as far as Jesse and Sydney's relationship and Jesse's actions.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, speculation goes to the mindset of another individual. She did not go to the mindset of Jesse or Sydney.
What's your response to that, Counselor?
Oh, then, Your Honor, I would like to amend my objection to lack of personal knowledge.
And to lack of personal knowledge on that end?
I did say in her own opinion, she said in her own opinion, I just asked her lay opinion of what she thought, or how she felt about Jesse.
That being said, for this witness to give even the lay opinion that something was going to happen sooner or later, it doesn't seem to fall within the parameters of this witness. So sustained, I'll strike that from the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
Just to be clear, is it just that sooner or later something's going to happen? Is that just
That
okay?
yes.
Now, why did you feel this way about Jesse?
Like I said, I was told on many occasions of his aggressive tendencies.
Objection, hearsay.
Please elaborate.
Your Honor, Mrs. Park just stated that she was told about Jesse's aggressive behavior on many occasions. We have not heard as to who told her this information, and I suspect that whoever did tell this to her would call her hearsay.
And your response?
I will withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Please do so. Sustained, stricken from the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you recall any instances in which you had any issues with Jesse?
Yeah, there was quite a few, and I've known Jesse since he's little. In particular, there was one when I had taken a particularly violent video game away from him. When I had taken it away from him, he threw a fit and he was screaming. And after that, the next day, my husband and I caught Sydney looking for this video game. And when I approached Sydney about it, I asked her, "What were you doing?" She told me that Jesse had told her, she broke down crying, that this made me believe that Jesse influenced her to do all these bad things. I mean, Sydney never.
Objection, more prejudicial and probative.
To what specific statement, or excuse me, to which statement?
To the statement where Mrs. Park said that Jesse forced Sydney into doing whatever, Your Honor.
Technical term, whatever.
I apologize, Your Honor.
Your response?
Your Honor, these actions happened in Miss Park's home. She would be able to see as to how Jesse influenced her own daughter, and then would also be able to testify as to what happened, is what she thinks as a result of this influence.
Well, to that end, I don't think we've laid any foundation that Ms. Park can actually say whether or not Jesse forced Sydney into doing this, or as to why. If we can lay a little more foundation, perhaps some of that could be admissible at this moment. However, I do think this is improper. So counsel's objection is sustained.
Yes, Your Honor.
Could you further describe the relationship between Jesse and Sydney?
Well, like I was saying, Jesse had a really strong influence on Sydney because Sydney had usually never acted out, but only when Jesse was there, Sydney would act out. Yeah.
Now, do you remember any instances in which you've seen any of this influence over your daughter?
Well, yeah, like I said, the time with the video game, Sydney told me personally that Jesse had told her to go look for this video game.
Objection, hearsay, as to Sydney's statement.
I don't recall her having Sydney say anything.
What was the witness's statement? Outside the presence of the jury, of course.
I was saying that Sydney told me that Jesse told her to do it.
Your response?
Your Honor, those are Sydney's statements. Mrs. Park just stated that Sydney told Mrs. Park that Jesse told her to do it.
Well, which statements are you going for?
Counsel's saying that because Sydney Park relayed these statements to Andy Park, that constitutes hearsay. Because Sydney Park's statements are an out-of-court statement off the truth. What's your response to that?
Well, Your Honor.
Please.
Your Honor, according to Rule 305, this is, you want a moment, should I get to it?
1 moment, please.
Better.
Please proceed.
So, this is hearsay within hearsay. Sydney relayed information to Ms. Park, told by Jesse, and Jesse is a party opponent in this case, which